Hey there, everyone. Name's Adam, and while there will not be a stream tonight, sorry about that. Not a lot of the crew could really show up, and I'm a little bit too obsessed with playing Hoi 4 at the moment to actually be willing to sit down for longer than a couple of hours. I decided to at least give you something to chew on for tonight. Don't worry, we're going to have an excellent stream on slashers next week. Yup, we're going to be covering the Night Horrors book for slashers. It's going to be great. And speaking of serial killing, I decided to show off a little bit of a shit post that myself, Tech, and Imsit got into right after one of our streams. It's actually kind of hilarious. So, with that in mind, let's talk about the British obsession with the two state solution. And most of you are familiar with the Israel and Palestine attempt, as well as possibly the India Pakistan incident. But that's not the only time that the UK has provided two state solutions. I'm not kidding. We've counted well over 50 of them, and just for tonight, I'm going to go through each and every one of them because I think it's absolutely fucking hilarious. So, with that in mind, let's begin. So, first off, as previously mentioned, the Israel and Palestine solution, two state solution, mainly because the British made promises to both the Zionist movements as well as Arabic movements during the interwar period as well as World War II to get them on side and to not blow stuff up. It culminated in modern times, which we're not going to go into. Another one that you might be familiar with, as I mentioned, is the India and Pakistan split. See, what happened was in India, the Indian National Congress decided to protest the Raj by not showing up. This gave the Muslim League a lot of extra power that they wouldn't otherwise have. And by the time the INC came back in, they were too influential, and the sectarian issues and violence because of divide and conquer rules that the UK had kind of made two state solution the only option. Although, unironically, the British would intervene to a lesser degree, at least diplomatically, for another two state solution further down the line in the form of Pakistan and Bangladesh, at least very marginally speaking. Another one that is also kind of related to this time period is the Sykes-Picot Agreement, which, if you don't know about this one, that is the splitting of the Ottoman Empire possessions between a French and British sphere. That's how Iraq, as well as Syria and Lebanon as well, came about. So that's another one. Obviously, the Irish and Northern Ireland solution that was a two-state solution. Although originally the idea was actually home rule. What happened was the House of Lords fucked that one up. This is one people forget about. The Belgium and Netherlands split. Belgium got sick and tired of the Netherlands because William, I forget which William, I think it was the third, decided to be an absolute bastard and essentially try to low-key evangelize his Lutheran faith on Belgium, which was Catholic. Yes, half of Belgium was Flemish, which is very closely related to Dutch. They didn't like it. The British, as well as the Prussians and French, both eventually agreed that Belgium must be separated because the Dutch were being way too stubborn. Hilariously, another two state solution came from this, the Luxembourg Netherlands split. This was basically because when Belgium was created, Luxembourg was cut off, and ultimately that was a split. Although I think that was more of a Prussian thing. The British were involved. The Swedish Norway split. So basically, after Denmark was destroyed, the United Kingdom actually did force Norway onto Sweden and vice versa, mainly to accommodate their new allies because Sweden was a pretty firm ally of the United Kingdom throughout the Napoleonic Wars. The British also intervened when Norwegian nationalism got much greater. The British had a very common element in doing that with the North Seas, mainly just because they get a lot of iron shipments from Sweden. So that's kind of why. Obviously, the Greek and Ottoman two-state solution. Basically, the Greeks were revolting. They intervened in the independence alongside France and Russia. Hilariously, they've split France at least once with the creation of the Free French under Charles de Gaulle, who proceeded to take France to an interesting way after the war. But yeah, unironically, after the French capitulated to the Germans, they set up their own French government out of protest. They participated in the East and West Germany split, obviously, so it's not surprising. They also eventually defended Taiwan, so they're loosely related to the Taiwanese Chinese split. They actually pressured, I think, Australia to divest Papua New Guinea from them, so that's another two-state solution. Um, a very infamous Trent affair for the Civil War, the American Civil War. They tried to intervene and create a two-state solution between the Confederates and Union. Although I should state that the British people were very much against this, mainly because they thought slavery was a bit shit, and the UK at this point was very, very much anti-slavery, so it was a bit shit. Another U.S. Intervention is actually the formation of Canada. Canada's entire identity was basically, we're not fucking Americans, to this day. Um, there was a proposal, at least among some British parliamentarians, to split off Quebec from Canada. That floundered, of course. There's also the Malaysia-Singapore split, which is not mentioned too much, but basically, due to the influx of Chinese laborers from essentially throughout the 19th century, Singapore gained its own identity, and when decolonization happened, the British kind of supported the Singaporean separatism. So that's another two-state solution. You you you're starting to realize that the UK might have a fucking problem because I do. This is quite amazing. No, seriously. We were boggling by this point because look at this shit. Look at this shit. Another little known fact was actually they attempted a two-state solution, both, I believe, Guatemala and Honduras. They succeeded with Guatemala, or was it Mexico? It's one of the two, by forming Belize, which is its own country. Lesser degree, they also tried to create a Mosquito Coast Protectorate, which eventually integrated with Honduras. So yeah, that's another two-state solution right there. Um, Little known fact, they actually propped up Argentina when Argentina declared independence from the Spanish king, Ferdinand. The British actually sent gunboats to support the junta. And I believe they also supported similar uprisings in Uruguay, which they demanded remain separate, although that wasn't very hard because that allowed the Uruguayans to gain more power. The most infamous one of all, mainly because of the character behind it, good old man-child Henry VIII's two-church solution. He literally took a sword and cut the English church from the Catholic Church. It's to the point where the Anglican traditions are very similar in most ways to Catholics. There's a little bit of differences here and there. Some Reformation elements were thrown in, but at the end of the day, it's just fuck it. I'm the head of state. I'm the head of church now, buddy. Um, Another one, the splitting of Rhodesia, North and South Rhodesia. North Rhodesia, I believe, would eventually be called crap. I don't remember it. Zambezia, I think. I don't quite remember that one. I'm sorry, natives to that region of the world. The South Rhodesia, though, is much more infamously known as Zimbabwe. Infamous because of the great ruins of Great Zimbabwe, Great Mutapa, which, fun fact, the British colonials actually thought were made by Indians or by Celts or something. Basically, desperate excuses to try to justify why it was not made by Africans because how no they couldn't have possibly built the same logic actually of Ancient Aliens because people are dumb and they don't realize that just because you don't got power tools you can do some pretty simple things. It's pretty fucking ridiculous. um, they've also participated in the splitting of Somalia and Somaliland. Although that one they don't recognize, it's more due to their colonial influence that Somaliland is a thing. They did support the independence struggle, at least on a limited scale, with South Sudan. I think they disavowed some of the more uh, terroristic acts, but they did at least support the notion of self-determination. Um, the British actually originally were not going to make a unified Libya, at least during initial peace talks after Italy got kicked out. One of the ideas was actually to split it between Cyrenaica and Tripoli, which would have made sense because traditionally Libya is usually two or three states. It's similar to actually to Iraq, which they just shoved together because fuck it. which you can kind of see why there's a bit of instability there, although it balanced out eventually. Um, they also proposed a split for Bosnia between the Ottoman Porte as well as the Austro-Hungarians. The response of that was the Austro-Hungarians just invaded. It didn't quite work out. As Prussia was getting more and more powerful in the kind of confederate, not the Confederation of the Rhine, post Holy Roman Empire, pre-unification, the British advocated for a North and South German Confederation, which I think is fucking hilarious. Um, oh yeah, I forgot. No, I already mentioned the Swedish and Norway thing. I'm also reading from notes, guys. It's fine. They intervened on the side of the Dominican Republic in their independence war against Haiti. So they suggested a two-state solution there, which I think is absolutely hilarious. Um, Another well-known one, maybe to some of you, one of you, okay, none of you. Kuwait and Iraq. See, Kuwait actually was a part of the Ottoman Empire at the time, both parts were. And the Sheikh of Kuwait was basically going, I don't want to be under the Sublime Porte anymore. Britain, can you step in? And the Ottomans just had to sit there and take it because they were the sick man in Europe. They also have tried to carve up France in the past previously because they did support the Corsican Republic, not against Genoa, but when France owned it during the Napoleonic Wars, they did. They had a two-state solution to both Yemen and Oman. When they left, they actually kind of created the coastal. They allowed the coastal Sultan of Muscat, and didn't really bother with the Imamate of Dhofar, which is in the interior of Oman. And North and South Yemen, that's because they tried to actually hold on to the port of Aden because it allowed for pretty useful projection capabilities alongside the Suez Canal. They also were responsible for the United Arab Emirates and Qatar splitting, the Trucial states. That's another example. They also repeatedly prevented Persia from conquering Herat, to the point where I would argue that they tried to prevent a Persian-Afghan unification, which, hey, to be fair, that sounds about right. And if you're another thing they actually advocated for, although this is more because of their longest treaty with their best friend Portugal, who they stabbed in the back in Africa. They also supported Portuguese independence from Spain back during the Iberian Dominion case. Although that was probably more to cut down the intense fear of a united Iberia, because let me tell you, 16th century Spain, fucking scary. You don't play around with that. They personally intervened diplomatically when the U.S. and Germany got into a fucking argument over Samoa. I'm not kidding, that actually happened, and they stepped in. They also intervened in Eritrea's independence struggle, mainly the Tigray, because of their long disconnect from Ethiopia, as well as some heavy mismanagement from the Derg regime. Did not want to be a part of Ethiopia anymore. There was a war they fought over this, and they were allowed to be independent. While I don't think they innately supported the Algerian Reformation, Algerian terms for independence, they did, I think, attempt to split it between a coastal France control of the Algerian shore and an independent Algeria in the interior. Both sides rejected this. They also advocated for Morocco and Western Sahara, and also they were very much okay and supported the splitting of Zanzibar and Oman. And if you're wondering why the British seem obsessed with splitting apart things besides the obvious mercantile interest and just the desire to, it gives you power. When you divide, you rule. Uh, you got to remember, the UK multiple times was the product of a two-state solution. For example, you have the Welsh and Saxon England. That was a two-state solution brought about by the literally eternal Anglos. And last but not least, the Angles and Jutes forming the Kingdom of England, a literal two-state solution. Oh, and last but not least, the Saxon law versus Dane law split, which happened after the Great Heathen Army invaded. They Christianized and eventually being reaffirmed by people like Knut and Hardknut. And with that, you can kind of understand why the United Kingdom might be obsessed with two-state solutions. which has led to much horror and dread in this spooky month, which is totally why I did it. Legitimately. No, seriously, this is real. And with that in mind, I hope you have an excellent day. And like I said, next week we will cover Slasher. Uh, have a good night, everyone.